Okay, if everybody could turn your microphones off. We ask you to come to order now for the 2020 Monash Conference. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ryan Ashard, and I'm the president of the Monash International Affairs Society. Before we commence today's proceedings, we acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we gather, wherever you may be in Australia or wherever you may be in other countries as well. And we pay respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Now, it's great to welcome you here to MUNash 2020 in the 75th year of the United Nations and the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. During this year, traditionally, we would be celebrating the work of the UN, putting all this celebration into what it's done since it came to be in 1945. However, we are not at Monash University. We are not in any conference hall. We are at home due to COVID-19 restrictions and lockdown in Victoria and the safety measures enacted by other states and territories and other countries, wherever you may be. However, this has not stopped us. With the great work of our Secretariat, headed by Dean Antos and Charlotte Jones, they have persevered, shaped this conference, made it flexible so that Monash 2020 could go ahead, keeping our rich tradition alive, but also ensuring that you all have a great experience. Because of their tireless work and their hard effort, this is the biggest and best conference we are set to hold. Now, this morning, you will hear from a plethora of speakers from around the world, both live and in pre-recorded messages. Speakers from Geneva, we have Jakarta, Washington, New York, wherever they may be. And we have delegates from around the world as well. We say good morning to our colleagues and our delegates from New Zealand and wherever you might be in Australia. Now, this is a very important conference. We are at a pivotal moment. 2020 has been a huge turning point. Not only is it making us reconsider and reevaluate our rules-based international system, which has been quite strong since 1945, but there are a lot of societal changes as well. COVID-19 has brought up so many issues which need addressing. And this conference highlights that it's young people here, just like yourself and just like myself, that will be that power to change. Now, I won't speak anymore. We will get the speakers. We will commence with our speakers today. And first up is a short little video message from our ambassador to the United States, the Honourable Arthur Sinodinos. Before being appointed US ambassador last year, he held a plethora of roles within the Australian government. But I won't say any more. And now we hand over to Ambassador Sinodinos.
Greetings from Washington, DC. As Australia's ambassador to the United States, I send you a warm greeting from across the Pacific. I commend all of you for gathering for the first time virtually to participate in the Monash Model United Nations Conference. And as I understand it, there will be people from across Australia and indeed internationally. And I know that you all share an interest in diplomacy and international affairs. Your studies in this field will stand you in good stead to comprehend and help address the complex challenges facing our region and the world. Australia is firmly committed to effective global cooperation. Engaging with the multilateral system is a key pillar of our foreign policy. This is because we live in a complex, interconnected world where countries need to coordinate their responses to the major challenges we all face. The health, economic and social crisis brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic is a sad reminder of the need to collaborate across borders. But rest assured that our staff here in Washington and our colleagues at the Australian Mission to the United Nations in New York are working every day to represent Australia's national interest. I want to congratulate you all and thank you for your participation. Have a great conference.
Thank you, Ambassador Sinodinos. We really appreciate the short message. Last year, I was lucky enough to be the Monash Co-Secretary General, running the conference with Hammer Hosen. This year, also serving as my Vice President, she also holds the role of Under Secretary General for Communications. Now, knowing Hammer, has put a lot of hard work into this role, and you are going to have a lot of fun with what she's got planned. So Hammer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ryan, for that introduction. As he said, my name is Hammer. Before I get into what we have planned today, I just want to note that Monash holds a very special place in my heart and a lot of people's hearts that are in this call today. It was actually my first Monash conference, MUN conference, but it was also the event that I think led me to become more engaged in international affairs and also within MIAS itself. And despite being online, I hope that we have planned enough activities, enough opportunities for you to continue that opportunity to engage with international affairs, but also just to meet like-minded individuals. The first thing that I wanted to note is the awards that we have up for Monash. So we have awards within each committee for the delegates to all be eligible. The first is most diplomatic. We've got best delegate. We've also got honourable mentions, and we have the position paper award. Besides the awards within the conference, we also have some activities going outside of the conference as well. The first is MUNash, which launched last night. It's basically a group where all of us can interact a bit more free, a bit more relaxed. A lot of people post memes, a lot of people just post updates about what's going on in their committee, so everyone can connect with each other in a more relaxed setting. We also will have an award for the best meme content on that group. So I will be posting information about that in each of your committee groups for just some rules and also just how to vote. Next, we also have an opportunity for you guys to send messages to people in other committees or your friends, perhaps you've made during socials, during lunch. We'll be sending wholesome diplomatic messages. We'll be going into each of your Zooms and sharing some messages that you want to share. So whether you're saying good job on your speech, or you want to say let's meet up with a coffee afterwards, we have that opportunity as well for you. We also have an opportunity for you to keep us informed in what's going on in your committees without making memes and without just posting. You can submit these tips anonymously through a secret blogger that will also be posting within MUNash. We will also be outlining that in your committees shortly. Well, I think that is pretty much everything from me. I will just say have a great conference and make the most of it and participate as much as you can in all the activities that we've planned for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hammer. And as the person who was featured in the winning meme last year, it is a really fun competition. Now we'll head to our next speaker. Now, being the 75th anniversary of the UN, the Monash Secretariat only thought it pertinent that we get a few words of advice from our ambassador and permanent representative to the United States, His Excellency the Honourable Mitch Fifield. Now, Mitch Fifield was appointed last year, succeeding Gillian Bird, who is now our ambassador to France. And Mitch Fifield has held various roles within the Australian government, being a senator from Victoria. We've been very lucky and fortunate to work closely with the UN mission in New York, working with former Ambassador Bird at Monash 2018, but also with Deputy Ambassador and now shift the cabinet to the General Assembly President Tegan Brink. So, Ambassador Fifield, the floor is yours.
G'day, Mitch Fifield here, Australia's Ambassador and Permanent Representative to the United Nations. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you today from New York City, and let me begin by first thanking today's organisers, the Monash International Affairs Society, on their efforts organising this virtual conference amid the challenging circumstances, and also for the important work that is done connecting students with a passion for international relations with the opportunities to learn and develop the skills critical for diplomacy. It's clear we're living through a period of enormous upheaval, and there's little doubt that the world will look different in the aftermath. Every day, COVID-19 tests the limits of international cooperation and multilateral institutions. It's caused a temporary retreat from global air connectivity, and it's forced nations to reevaluate things like critical supply chains. Never before have people everywhere been so universally affected by a single event. If COVID has taught us anything, it's that, like it or not, we live in a deeply interconnected and increasingly competitive world. And amid this global crisis, the need for the United Nations to fulfil its mandate is clearer than ever. Since the outbreak of the virus, the World Health Organization has certainly received the lion's share of attention, but it's not the only UN agency that's playing a critical role in the pandemic response. The World Food Programme, for instance, continues to operate flights to more than 130 countries, transporting huge volumes of food and medical supplies. And with schools temporarily closing their doors, UNICEF is helping children around the world access remote learning. And in the refugee camps from Syria to Bangladesh, UNHCR is providing much needed water, sanitation and hygiene services. Now, none of this is to say that the UN efforts have been perfect, nor that it should seek to avoid scrutiny. In fact, efforts to scrutinise and to improve the system are evidence of exactly how much nations such as Australia value the UN. But while the UN may need some reform, it remains the only forum where all states, big and small, can come together to address shared challenges and to pool their resources towards agreed goals. As the world emerges from the pandemic, the UN will be an important forum for deciding how we want to rebuild and for driving collective action to address the myriad challenges we face. Your generation, while less susceptible to the health impacts of the virus, will feel the social and economic consequences of this pandemic for years to come. It's therefore really important that young people and young Australians have a seat at the table during the recovery process, including by having a platform at the UN. Australians bring skills and qualities that are essential for an effective, accountable and responsive UN. They bring a strong sense of mission, the ability to facilitate collaboration, a commitment to responsible and ethical behaviour, and the notion of a fair go. As young Australians interested in international affairs, your experiences, your integrity, your pragmatism, your values are needed now more than ever by the international community. So my message for each of you today is simple. Stay engaged in the global issues that matter. Begin thinking critically about the public policy challenges our world face and how you think bodies such as the UN should address them. In its 75th anniversary year, the UN remains a vital partner to Australia. Multilateralism has a bright future and you can be part of it. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Fifield. During this opening ceremony, we'll be introducing you to various members of our Secretariat. Next up is one of the most important roles on a Secretariat, and there are Under-Secretaries General for Welfare. During this conference, should you have any issues, it is them who will oversee that, who will give you that assistance. So I will now hand over to Ludwig Cook and Georgia Potter, our Under-Secretaries General for Welfare. The floor is yours.
Thanks for that, Ryan. So my name's Ludwig, and alongside Georgia, we'll be your welfare officers for MUNash over the next 2 days. So first of all, before we get into the actual stuff, we hope you're as excited for the conference as we are, and we just quickly want to run over a couple of important welfare-related things, which I'll hand over to Georgia.
Thanks. So if you have any concerns at all, at any time during the conference, you can contact us at any time. Please check out in your Facebook groups. I'll have made a post with both our phone numbers and an email that you can contact at any time during the conference about anything. We've also got the incident report form, which is a place for you to report any incidents, which you can do anonymously if you like. Make sure you also check out the welfare policy and rules of procedure, because that shows what is expected of you and what your rights are. I think that's it for everything, but just know that we're happily available to talk to you at any time if you have any concerns, even if they seem really small. We hope you enjoy the conference. Thank you.
Thank you both so much and good luck during the conference. Our next speaker is a very important speaker for they are also a Monash Distinguished Alumni. Matt Anderson, ESM, is currently the Director of the Australian War Memorial, taking up his appointment in February 2019. Prior to that, he held various postings as Deputy High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, High Commissioner to the Solomon Islands, Ambassador to Afghanistan, and various other roles. Director Anderson has had a very long and distinguished career, and we're very fortunate to have him address us today, on the basis that whilst being the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, it is also the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. It was out of World War II which our new international institutions, which we are also celebrating this year, were built. So we'll now hand over to Director Anderson. He has the floor.
To Ryan, Charlotte and Dean, and all involved in Monash University's International Affairs Society, it's my honour to have been invited to address MUNash 2020, not least as I'm a Monash graduate, and I've carried that distinction proudly throughout my career. Indeed, in 2018 I was made a Monash Distinguished Alumni, which only proves one of 2 points: that there's a statute of limitations on academic transcripts, or that there was a fire in Monash's records area at some stage since 1997. So you should all take some heart. But as former UN Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld said, and famously, peacekeeping is not a job for a soldier, but only a soldier can do it. On the 14th September 1947, 4 Australian military observers entered the field as part of the United Nations Good Officers Committee to Indonesia. Since then, not a day has passed without an Australian serving in a peacekeeping operation somewhere in the world. Australia has made more than 41,000 individual deployments to more than 60 peacekeeping operations in over 30 countries and disputed zones. From Somalia to the Solomon Islands, from Bosnia to Bougainville, Australian servicemen and servicewomen have deployed in roles as varied as election monitors, signallers, negotiators, observers and air traffic controllers. They've carried out humanitarian demining, they've delivered aid, they've provided logistics and communication support, and they've been attached to medical teams. But of course, it's no longer a job only for soldiers. As our understanding of the complexities of peacekeeping and peacemaking have evolved, Australian interventions have become more tailored, as the regional assistance mission to Solomon Islands showed that after the guns have been collected, confiscated and destroyed, and militants have been arrested and prosecuted for their crimes during the tensions, the hard task of nation building must go on. Australia has proven willing and able to help our neighbours build back better. Here at the Australian War Memorial in Canberra, we recently hosted an exhibition called The Courage for Peace. One of the first exhibits was a painting of the 1919 signing of the Treaty of Versailles in the Hall of Mirrors. The diminutive figure of Australia's firebrand Prime Minister Billy Hughes was captured leading the Dominion's charge in that palace in France, where he took Australia from almost anonymity within an imperial chorus to a centre-front role on the international stage, and eventually to our foundation membership of the League of Nations. In 1946, Australia held the first presidency of the United Nations Security Council, and the exhibition also featured a picture taken in 1947 of Herbert Doc Evatt, Australia's Minister for External Affairs, when he was President of the United Nations General Assembly. I've thought since that we missed the boat in the naming of that exhibition. While we called it The Courage for Peace, I would have called it The Courage to Lead, as the exhibition also told stories of Australia's leadership of the Cambodian peace process, our leadership of the Unarmed Peace Monitoring Group on Bougainville, of Ramsey in the Solomon Islands, of Interfed in Timor-Leste, and in humanitarian and disaster responses in our region. Occasions when we've proven we've had the courage and the capability to lead. In my brief career in uniform and a longer stint in poorly tailored suits, I've had the honour to serve alongside our remarkable men and women. From defence cooperation in Tonga, to peace monitoring on Bougainville, to humanitarian assistance in Samoa, and support to the enabling environment for the Regional Assistance Mission in Solomon Islands. On the MH17 Task Force, working through the UN Security Council Resolution 2166 to support the repatriation of 41 Australians who have been shot down over Ukraine and who called Australia home. And of course, I was at the sharper end of our deployments as our ambassador in Afghanistan in 2015 and 16. So these lived experiences informed the worldview that I bring to my new role here at the Australian War Memorial. While it is a shrine, a memorial, a museum and an archive, the Australian War Memorial is also a monument to 102,000 Australians who gave their lives for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world. And as such, it is as much, indeed more, about peace as it is about the salutary lessons of the horrors of war. Here, we honour those who have served by promoting peace. Of course, it's in the context of war and warlike operations and peacekeeping, but my vision for the Australian War Memorial is for it to be a place where we can honour women and men whose lives were not devoted to themselves, but to us, and, most often in their final moments, to each other. It's here where we learn about the tragedy of war through the personal stories of individuals most affected by it, and where we reflect as a society on what more we could and should have done to prevent it, and where, hopefully and in time, we heal those with physical scars, with emotional injuries and with moral trauma, where through deeper understanding and more meaningful commemorations we heal individuals, societies and nations. Over the next couple of days you'll deal with some weighty issues of foreign, trade and security policy, none so pressing as the global and regional responses to a pandemic and what that might mean for the rules-based international order that we have so long taken for granted. But please allow me today to finish with an observation. In the Memorial Garden here at the Australian War Memorial, we have dedicated only 3 statues to individuals. Simpson, a stretcher bearer at Gallipoli and his donkey; to Sir Edward Weary Dunlop, who was a surgeon and saviour of the prisoners of war on the notorious Thai-Burma Railway; and most recently to General Sir John Monash. At the base of the statue of Monash, this soldier, engineer, civic leader, a man who despised war for its impossible cruelty, for its waste and for its misery, is the quote made in the aftermath of the First World War and in the midst of a most divided Australian society. "Every hour," he wrote in his diary, "of every day and every night I am in the midst of tremendous events." When asked in the 1930s by a group of disgruntled compatriots to lead a coup, Monash responded by letter. "Depend upon it," he said, "the only hope for Australia is in the ballot box and an educated electorate." Monash's words, now inscribed on his statue as he stares up here at the dome of the Australian War Memorial, are as relevant now as they were then. They were a roadmap for a peaceful, educated, democratic society that continues to enjoy religious, economic and political freedoms. I wish you every success with the conference and for your continued education, and I encourage you to visit the Australian War Memorial as part of that education, of what it means to be Australian and of the heavy price that has been paid for it. Good luck over the next few days.
Thank you, Director Anderson, and thank you for those wise words. It's very poignant that in this, the 75th anniversary of World War II, we remember the servicemen and women who lost their lives for Australia. Moving on to our next speaker, and this is a speaker who has had such a rich career in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and as a representative for our country. His Excellency Gary Quinlan, Ambassador to Indonesia. Ambassador Quinlan has held various other roles within the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. He has been a representative and been a diplomat to ASEAN and the East Asia Summit, to the United Nations, been a senior advisor on foreign affairs and defence to the Prime Minister, and held various other postings and roles. We are very lucky to have him broadcasting live to us today. And I now ask, Ambassador, are you with us?
Okay, thank you very much, Ryan, and your team, and good morning to everybody. It's a great opportunity to be able to engage with the future like this, and the future, of course, is you. And particularly through Monash. Monash, at the moment, one of the world's great universities, is in the process of establishing in Indonesia the first foreign university campus. And it's appropriate that should be the case, and it's a great thing to see. Look, my career has been quite a mix of, I think, what have turned out to be the key points in Australian foreign policy. I've worked in the United States, in Washington, DC, and in Canberra on US policy. I've worked on China during our first major crisis in our relations with China back in, gosh, I was so much younger, back in 1996 and 1997. I've worked on Southeast Asia, been our ambassador, high commissioner in Singapore, now ambassador in Indonesia. And as you say, worked on the East Asian Summit and ASEAN. And of course, I've spent a lot of my career as well working on multilateral issues, and particularly the United Nations. Now, all of that, I think, has reinforced to me the central point that Australia always has to look after itself. We've got to remind ourselves of that. We've always got to have a very strong, proactive approach to look after our own interests. And those interests, of course, reflect the interests of a lot of other countries, and ultimately all countries, of course, in a strong international order based on rules. Those key interests, as I say, where we've had to build coalitions of other countries to work with us and us work with them, as in the United Nations and other multilateral organizations, in the World Trade Organization, where we are one of the main drivers in the creation of APEC in our own region, in things like the Cambodia peace settlement in our region, working with the ASEAN Regional Forum on Security, helping develop that, and of course the Pacific Islands Forum. All of these things are where Australia has stepped up to help design the rules and the institutions, the architecture to look after and implement those rules. We always have to work extra hard because we're not a member of some other organization of countries like the EU. We're not a superpower, we're a middle power. So we have to step up and fill that gap and take the lead ourselves, and particularly using three key instruments. Defense, always. You have to be strong and resilient in yourself so that people know that you're capable of addressing issues and stepping in humanitarian crises and all the rest. Diplomacy, where we don't spend enough money, it's a simple fact. And development, always development as a way of helping shape the region of countries that surround us. Now, excuse me. At the moment, we all know COVID-19 we're experiencing, it's the greatest disruption globally and to all of our lives since World War II, so that the future coming out of COVID-19 is far more uncertain than it was before. But I just want to make the point that pre-COVID, our world was already experiencing some of the most fundamental historic change it has ever. You've had a massive shift of strategic and economic gravity to the Indo-Pacific. China's emerged as the world's second superpower. The United States under President Trump has ceased to be the main pillar of multilateralism in the world. Democracy's under pressure. There's environmental and ecological change, which is a threat to all of us. And we're also experiencing, and sometimes I think people forget this, the fastest pace of technological change in human history, with great benefits in liberating us in many ways, but also creating more uncertainty. What is the future of work? How can we guarantee our freedoms? States, how do we deal with the fact that states, through new technologies, are able to subvert the political and economic, even the social fabric and structures of other countries through interference? So there are significant bad sides, or dangerous sides, I should say, to the new technological change. All of this shapes the world in which you are in fact going to become the lead actors. And then, of course, we find into what is already a very combustible mix, COVID-19. Obviously, COVID has put the world into economic recession, profound economic recession. In Australia alone, in the last quarter, Our growth rate was the lowest growth we've experienced since World War II, yet our growth was 2 and even 3 times higher than the growth rate in most other comparable major economies. Global poverty has increased, and substantially in many areas. We face the prospect of major famine in parts of the world. Social instability is growing. Nationalism, not multilateralism, has come to the fore as countries seek to protect themselves and close borders for reasons which are totally understandable, but it can make countries so much more inward focused at the very moment when they need to be much more outward focused if we're to find a way out of this crisis and also a way to shape the post-COVID world. We've got strategic change, which was already happening, has become more accelerated by COVID. Rules, the norms, the institutions we need to guarantee some order in the world are under far more acute pressure. US-China relations are getting worse, disinformation, cyber intrusions are threatening our sovereignty, including the integrity of our economies and our digital economic future. So the jungle is growing back, as Robert Kagan, who's well worth reading if you haven't read any of his books on strategic thinking and all the rest of it, and geopolitics. He published one 2 years ago saying, pre-COVID, the jungle is back, and it is. Now, what do we do? And I'll conclude pretty quickly. It seems so obvious, of course, because multilateralism, working together, is obviously the key. It's obviously the key. Multilateral cooperation through the UN preeminently, but also through all its other forms, is actually indispensable, and we have no future without it. COVID, of course, is just the worst of the current COVID threats. More will come. As for the UN itself, it's inevitably imperfect. We know that. And it's imperfect because it's a hostage to what its member states will allow it to do and what they will pay for. But it is indispensable. Matt Anderson, who just spoke to you now, quoted one of the first Secretary Generals of the United Nations, probably the greatest Secretary General, Dag Hammarskjöld, who was tragically shot down over the Congo in the 1960s while on a peace mission. He famously said, and I quote, "The UN was not created to take us to heaven, but to save us from hell." And when I served in New York, I was 6 years ambassador there, 2 years on the Security Council, President of the Security Council, all that kind of thing. I used to remind myself at stages when I used to get really frustrated, particularly, who do you get frustrated with at the UN? The major powers. You get frustrated with the Americans, with the Chinese, with the Russians, with the Brits and the French, the 5 permanent powers on the Security Council, who bonded together at times, despite their toxic politics between them, to preserve their veto power and everything else. So you get pretty frustrated at times. But I used to remind myself, this is not perfection we're talking about. We're trying to save ourselves from a worse future. I'll finish by saying, look, repeating, I think, what Mitch Fifield said about other parts of the UN at the moment, absolutely vital. The World Health Organization, it's still in the front line globally against COVID. Needs reform, we all know that. That's up to us as member states. We must make sure it happens, but it's absolutely indispensable. The WHO still vaccinates 40% of the world's children, 40%. The food program, UNICEF, the UN Population Fund, Mitch has spoken about the work they're doing right now, today, and for the foreseeable future in relation to relief for COVID. But there are other parts of the UN system I hope you can bear in mind over the next couple of days as well in your own discussions that are instrumental to our future. I've mentioned the World Trade Organization, which is under pressure from those who break the rules, but also from the fact the United States has taken a very different attitude to the World Trade Organization and is skeptical of it. We need to protect it, reform it. We need to ensure that the UN Convention on Law of the Sea and the rules of the oceans and sea are maintained. We need to maintain the basic arms control architecture, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, the UN Chemical Weapons Convention, which Australia was largely instrumental in developing. These are far more important now and for the future when Russia and the United States are undercutting, repudiating their own arms agreements, and when China doesn't want to be constrained. So all of this is an agenda for the future. Reform of the UN, including the Security Council, is obviously urgent. And COVID-19, of all things, has dramatised very starkly just how bad our lack of global leadership has been during this crisis. And what does that mean? And this is where I'll conclude. It means that middle powers like us, like Australia, and indeed like Indonesia, with whom we work very intensely. Indonesia, Australia are at a new stage in our relationship. Politically, we're closer than we've ever been, and we work together to try and frame and shape our region in a way in which it can become far more resilient. We make the same judgments and assessments about what the challenges are. We make different policy responses at times because we are different countries, but essentially we have the same ambition and we're doing it more and more together. So middle powers like us and Indonesia, we have a decisive role now in the current world and in any future world, which will be sustainable and successful in stepping up to fill the gap that's been exposed during COVID-19 in global leadership. We must be activists and we must make the changes that are necessary. And since all of that activity is going to determine your futures, your future world, it's going to be a very vital task for your generation. I very much endorse Ambassador Mitch Fifield's comments to you. Essentially, be engaged, be active, and always, please, stay in the arena because it's the future. Thank you. This has been a great opportunity. I spoke too long, forgive me. Terima kasih.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Quinlan. We really appreciate the address and those wise words as well. We hope we can work together again in the future. Something that Ambassador Quinlan mentioned was that he served as Australia's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations, a role he held during our term on the Security Council, with himself holding the presidency of the Security Council during that time. Now, one thing he did mention in his speech was often a lot of trouble coming from major powers. And in the Security Council, for those who don't know a lot about the UN, there are 5 permanent members. As part of MUNash, we've reached out to those permanent members and have video messages from 3 of their ambassadors to Australia. Those are Her Excellency Victoria Treadle, CMG MBO, who is the High Commissioner of the United Kingdom to Australia, His Excellency Christophe Benot, who is the French Ambassador to Australia, and His Excellency Dr. Alexei Pavlovsky, the Russian Ambassador to Australia. We thought it was really pertinent that in this, the 75th anniversary of World War II and the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, we reach out to these ambassadors to hear their perspective. However, we have also reached out to Australia's ambassador to Japan, His Excellency the Honourable Richard Fort AC, who was also former Premier of Western Australia. Their rich perspective on multilateralism and also on the work being done to tackle COVID-19 is what you will hear now. To their excellencies, I give you the floor.
Dear members of the Monash International Affairs Society, I'm delighted today to address this message to you, because this year, as you open your annual conference, the United Nations celebrate their 75th anniversary. France has always been a strong supporter of this crucial institution. On 26 June 1945, 50 states signed the United Nations Charter. Since then, the objectives enshrined in this charter have protected us and inspired us. And as we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, we face an unprecedented crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic is not only a sanitary crisis, it is also an economic, social, and human crisis. The repercussions are painful reminders that global challenges cannot be addressed in isolation, and that multilateral cooperation, the rules-based international order and its institutions, are the only reliable guarantee for international stability, peace, and prosperity. Today, more than ever, a strengthened and renewed multilateralism is needed. The climate crisis remains a reality. At the end of this year, we shall also celebrate the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, and we must live up to it by showing an ambitious climate engagement and promote a sustainable economic recovery. We must also take action in the face of the massive decline of our biodiversity. We must continue to act for international peace and security and to defend and protect human rights, including gender equality and women's rights that have been severely affected by the pandemic. The health governance is, of course, another major issue and remains a priority. Together, we can build a better world for tomorrow, and France and Australia are more than ever committed to contribute to this international endeavour. Your generation has demonstrated its deep involvement in international affairs, and I'm certain that you, members of the Monash International Affairs Society, will become tomorrow key actors of the strengthening of multilateralism. Thank you.
I'm delighted to be able to join your annual conference, albeit virtually. But as we're discovering at this time of COVID, digital diplomacy is an increasingly important part of our diplomatic toolkit. At a time of crisis, and this is a crisis that we have not seen, this world has not seen for decades, it is a new battle. It is a battle against a virus. And as we emerge from it, what does the world of diplomacy look like? International travel has been severely impacted. The ability for our ministers to come and see each other, to travel to the UK or here to Australia, has its limitations currently. So again, the connectivity between people is one of the big challenges of diplomacy at this time in our collective history. But of course, history gives us lessons that we can look back on. The last major world war, World War II, saw a change in the international order. Some of the institutions and structures that have guided us and delivered a global platform for an international rules-based system. The establishment of the United Nations, the first meeting of the UN General Assembly taking place in London after the World War. And indeed, the establishment of institutions and organizations that have been our guiding principles. So in a new age, in a post-COVID world, we need to look to those international institutions to restore, reform, to strengthen them, to refocus them for the reality of the second half of this century. The conversations that we have at this time of crisis are about building back the world better. If we cannot do that, then we will have ultimately failed. And of course, in a world where we're seeing increasing contestation, rivalry, and competition, it is remembering the core values that bind us: good governance, democracy, the rule of law, the respect for human rights, including the freedoms that we take for granted. These are precious, and we have to work hard to ensure that we maintain them. So the institutions that were created after the Second World War are as relevant and important today to deal with the new challenges and to realize the opportunities ahead. COVID, climate, contestation, and competition. This is the reality of our global world right now. There has never been a greater time for diplomacy, for understanding, for mutual respect, for the international rules-based order. And that is what we are here to deliver on with our great partnerships and allies like that we have with Australia. So I wish you well in your conference. Great debate, great speakers, and that you come away from your conference with ideas and challenge and possibly solutions too. Thank you for including me in your program.
I'm grateful for this invitation to address the participants of the Model UN Conference at the Monash University. For anyone striving to work as a diplomat or engage in international relations in any other capacity, taking part in such an event is probably the best possible exercise. Why? Because the UN, which turns 75 this year, is central to the existing world order. Its mechanisms are indispensable if the international community is to cope with new and ever more serious challenges, including the latest COVID-19 pandemic. 75 years back, the founding fathers of the Universal Organization came together in the aftermath of the horrible tragedy of the Second World War, their nations having defeated the absolute evil of Nazism, and they shared a common aspiration to save the succeeding generations from the scourge of war to construct a just and democratic system of international relations. True, UN is often criticized, especially for not being efficient enough. And of course, the UN is not ideal, but it is the best achievement of the past 75 years in the interests of strengthening international security. Despite all difficulties, the UN remains the cornerstone of the post-war world order and a platform that has no alternative, where all countries, without exception, can discuss and address topical international matters on an equal basis. Its importance increases at a time when countries are becoming more interdependent and when the number of transborder threats continues to grow. As a younger generation, it is up to you to chart ways of boosting the efficiency of the UN and strengthening its central coordinating role in world politics. May today's exercise become for you a major step in preparation for this mission.
Thank you for the opportunity to send a message during this Monash Model United Nations Conference. It's a shame that delegates from the Monash International Affairs Society were unable to come to Japan as scheduled for the Harvard University World Model United Nations earlier this year. I was looking forward to the discussion on multilateral diplomacy, and I look forward to the day when international travel recommences so important conferences such as this are able to take place again. I'm delighted to see so many young Australians pursuing a passion in diplomacy and foreign affairs. The reality is that under COVID, Australia's ability to prosecute our national interests internationally has never been more important. The pandemic has highlighted the importance of effective multilateralism. COVID is a shared crisis that affects every country and can only be solved through close cooperation. Thankfully, for the most part, governments have set aside ideology to protect their populations to the extent possible. Australia brings a great deal to the table in international institutions. As Foreign Minister Payne pointed out earlier this year, our values such as fairness and openness, as well as our well-earned reputation for having a practical approach to problem solving, mean that we are a respected member of the international community. Australian delegates in New York and Geneva are sought out for our pragmatism and our ability to work collaboratively. In terms of my own experience as Australia's ambassador in Japan over the past 4 years, I have witnessed the relationship between Australia and Japan go from strength to strength. Japan and Australia have always been good trading partners, but in recent years, our two countries have developed a deeper sense of trust and friendship. A simple example of this was the recent teleconference meeting between Prime Minister Morrison and former Japanese Prime Minister Abe. The meeting was scheduled to last for 45 minutes, but ended up going for much longer because the two leaders had so many issues of substance to discuss. I hope you are able to keep your discussions and debates to a tight schedule during the Model United Nations. In conclusion, if I may, I would like to offer you one piece of advice as you pursue your passion for international relations. While it is very important to learn as much as you can about other countries and the way they operate, it is at least equally important to know as much as you can about Australia. Maintain your curiosity about our history, geography, regions, systems of governments, political processes and literature. It will hold you in good stead. All the best for the Model United Nations Conference, and I hope you are able to experience the best of effective multilateralism through your debates and discussions. Arigato gozaimasu.
Arigato gozaimasu, and thank you very much. And thank you very much to the ambassadors who provided an address. Before moving on to our next speaker, I'd just like to remind all the delegates here, if you're not speaking, could you please keep your microphone on mute? Moving on to our next speakers, and they are members of our Secretariat. Sabina Abdullah and Pravind Iswaran are our Under-Secretaries General for Committees for 2020. As somebody who held the role in 2018, I know how monumental of a task it is, and I thank them for all their hard work in the lead up to the conference. Pravind and Sabina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ryan. My name is Sabina, and I'm joined by Prav as USG for Committees. We welcome everyone to MUNash 2020, and we hope everyone is as excited for this highly anticipated event for the year as we are. After several meetings and endless phone calls, we present to you 6 contrasting committees, which range from a crisis mode for the daring and beginner committees for the newcomers. All these committees demonstrate a huge tenet of this conference, which is to provide you with the opportunity to exercise your diplomatic skills and produce tangible solutions. These are real-life applicable events and skills that will serve you for many years to come in your respective fields. Thank you to everyone for coming, but a special thanks to our MUNash Secretariat and co-directors for organizing this.
Thank you, Seb. On a similar note, I would like to welcome all the delegates to MUNash 2020. When we were creating this year's conference, we very much looked at bringing a focus to the many contemporary issues of our time. And we truly believe that this is reflected in the topic choices for this year. Today's MUNash also occurs during the 75th General Assembly of the UN, which is too being conducted online. It is a reminder that these important conversations in diplomacy won't be stifled by the great distance between all of us. That the existence of this conference is a testimony to those ideals, the hard work of the Secretariat and our directors, all who I greatly thank for their effort in bringing this conference to fruition. And on that note, I would like to welcome you all again to MUNash 2020. I hope you all have great fun, and we all look forward to seeing you in your committees later on today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabina and Pravind. As a director for MUNash 2020, thank you for all your hard work as well. And to those delegates who are in the Joint National Cabinet, I look forward to seeing you in the chamber. We now move on to our next speaker, who is Natasha Stott-Despoja, AO. Natasha Stott-Despoja has had a long and distinguished career, being one of the youngest senators in Australian history and then becoming the leader of the Australian Democrats at a very young age. She moved into a career of academia briefly before becoming Australia's ambassador for women and girls. She is now the chairperson of Our Watch, which is an organisation about which aims to eliminate violence and discrimination against women. Currently, Natasha Stott-Despoja is Australia's candidate for CEDAW, which is the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. The elections were set to take place a few months ago, but due to COVID-19, they had to unfortunately be pushed back. We are very lucky to have Ms. Stott-Despoja address you all now, and the floor is hers.
Hi everyone, welcome to MUNash 2020. I'm Natasha Stott-Despoja. Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. I'm on Kaurna land and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to any elders from other communities who are present or listening today. I want to acknowledge your MIAS President, Ryan Attard, and of course your Co-Secretaries General, Charlotte Jones and Dean Antos. But a big warm welcome to all your delegates at this, the World Cup of Diplomacy, or is it the Oscars of Democracy? I'm not sure, but either way, this is the largest gathering that you've held, and I congratulate you for that, particularly under the current circumstances. I also commend you on being the premier model UN society in Australia. I think I've been asked here in a few capacities. As a former senator, so I spent almost 13 years in the Australian Federal Parliament. As a former diplomat, I was honoured to serve as Australia's Ambassador for Women and Girls between 2013 and 2016, and now as the chair of a national organisation to prevent violence against women and their children, called Our Watch. The latter has been one of the great privileges of my life, but it means every day I'm conscious of one of the worst manifestations of gender inequality, and that's violence against women and girls. I know these are challenging times, they're confronting times for many people, but the rates and the severity of violence against women and children in Australia and around the world have increased. I know many of you are studying, working, living in Melbourne and in Victoria, and I can't imagine how difficult, how confronting it's been. So I'm sending you solidarity and support. And I know that many of the challenges that we're facing in Australia are compounded, they're amplified across the region and the world. We've seen a diminution in the rights of women and girls who are already disproportionately affected by a crisis. And we know that traditionally marginalised or discriminated against groups such as those with a disability or those in extreme poverty, this pandemic has made their lives worse. The way to build back better, as they say, or the road to recovery will rely on support and collaboration. And you know better than most that multilateralism is a key to this. We know that this pandemic has had a devastating impact in a range of ways, in health, on society, economically. And we know that governments, NGOs, civil society organisations, public service organisations and individuals need leadership, and we need to work together if we are to grapple with some of the multitude of challenges that this pandemic threatens to undermine in terms of our shared values. It's a time for leadership. And I know that the international community, including the UN and its agencies, as well as its treaty bodies and civil society, have a critical role in charting a road to recovery. And I'm hoping to play maybe a small part in this if I'm fortunate enough to be elected as Australia's candidate for CEDAW, the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. But even that election has been postponed, understandably. But maybe that raises issues for the workings of the UN in the current environment too. Will this new virtual medium mean greater democratisation? Or the fact that the UN can't deal with issues like electronic voting? What does that mean for the functioning of multilateralism? But I digress. I'll leave you to grapple with some of those issues. As Ambassador for Women and Girls, I got to see some of the best and some of the worst aspects of humanity. I saw extreme poverty, I saw trafficking and abuse. But on the flip side, I saw individuals and governments and NGOs and the United Nations make a difference, improving, enhancing, changing, and sometimes saving people's lives. This year was supposed to be a celebration. It's the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. It's the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. It's 20 years since the Women, Peace and Security Agenda and 5 years since the Sustainable Development Goals. And I know that we've made some progress, but we know with human rights and social justice, we must be forever vigilant. And I don't want the pandemic to threaten some of the many goals that we've made. Crucial to this will be ensuring that we have women in leadership positions. But not only that, I want to see our difference and diversity reflected and represented throughout our decision-making institutions, including in the United Nations and parliaments and defence, industry, business, the media, and so on. And I know you're familiar with the statistics. No one country in the world has achieved gender equality, yet no country, regardless of its circumstances, can succeed with utilising only the skills of half its population. I know that 64% of the world's illiterate are women. I know that 135 million girls are out of school, and yet an increase in a girl's schooling by 1 year adds not only to GDP, but lowers infant mortality rates and it boosts the eventual annual earnings of women and girls. And I know there's a reason the UN calls educating girls the silver bullet in human development. We're all familiar with one of the greatest advocates for girls in education, Malala Yousafzai. I love the fact that this youngest ever Nobel laureate has put these issues on the international agenda, and they've called that the Malala effect. And I ask you, as you debate issues, seemingly intractable issues like our fragile environment, human rights, racism, gender equality over the next few days, what will your equivalent of the Malala effect be? Hey, no pressure. As Doug Hammarskjöld said, the former UN Secretary General, the United Nations was not created to bring us to heaven, but in order to save us from hell. I think these sentiments are more relevant than ever. As we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, I think we can actually draw strength from the pen holders of that UN Charter who did envisage a world that was based on peace and security. And I know that many of you are already stepping up to this challenge. So all power to you. As another former UN Secretary General, Kofi Annan, always said, you are never too young to lead. Good luck with your deliberations for MUNash 2020. It's been an honour to be a part of it, albeit virtually, and I look forward to when we can meet and talk again in person. In the meantime, all strength to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dr. Spoyer, and good luck on your election to CEDAW. We now move on to our next speaker, who's speaking to us about similar topics. Kate Gilmore is the former Deputy UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. Ms. Gilmore has a long and distinguished career and held various roles. She is responsible for the foundation of Australia's first Centre Against the Discrimination of Women at the Royal Women's Hospital in Melbourne. She has also been the National Director of Amnesty Australia, and she has also held various other roles at the United Nations, including a role at the UN Population Fund. She is currently a fellow at Harvard University and turned her efforts towards academia. We're very lucky to have Ms. Gilmore send this recorded message about various important issues for us young people today. Ms. Gilmore, the floor is yours.
Dear friends, it's a great joy to join the Monash Model United Nations Conference, and in doing so I send you warm greetings, particularly for these difficult times. Last year, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty, Australian, incidentally, Philip Alston, found the UK to be amongst the most unequal of countries in the developed world. The UK government response was swift. Surely the UN has better ways of wasting its money, it said, and threatened to lodge a formal complaint against Alston. As a critic explained, when you think of special rapporteurs on human rights, you expect the UN to be visiting Sub-Saharan Africa or Haiti. You don't expect them to be visiting the UK. In other words, we don't expect the multilateral system to work. We don't expect that adherence to universal values will be evaluated universally. We don't expect an equality of revelation about inequality. The Special Rapporteur's assessment came at an historic time, the UK being in the midst of an historic retreat not merely from the mechanics and structures of the multilateral system that it had helped author, but inevitably from its very underlying principles and values. Many other countries too are tramping down a Brexit-like path, tramping down a path away from the so-called liberal international order. As the United Nations turns 75, why this crisis of confidence? Is it because the international system is failing, or because it threatens to succeed? In a world now so much smaller and far more interconnected, it's hard to see legitimacy in opposition to global cooperation. In a world of member states with such awful track records for brutalization of their own peoples, it's hard to argue there's no need for human solidarity beyond national borders. In a world whose economics and commodities systems are so intertwined, it's hard to explain how walls have become more important than bridges. So is abandonment of the multilateral system due to its poor performance? Yep, multilateral cooperation has helped avoid outright conflict between nuclear powers. It's near to eradicated smallpox, protected heritage sites around the world, asserted the human rights of women and children. In all regions, the development agenda has invested in water, transportation, education and employment. Without a global system and international administration of that, those feats would not have been accomplished. Yet, although ours is a far wealthier world, it is also far more unequal. Although thanks to multilateralism, combat of discrimination and inequality are binding international obligations, their toxins remain deeply embedded in national and transnational architecture, leaving millions utterly excluded from the prosperity promised by the Global Development Project, with even more now pushed further behind by disproportionate impacts of climate change, contagion and conflict. But poverty, discrimination, inequality, those are policy choices. When the UN turned 50, a former UN official, Maurice Bertrand, warned then that in the near future countries would start to resist global cooperation so as to protect their unequal advantages and that of their middle classes. And he predicted two opposing options would emerge: defend universal human rights or support populist, authoritarian and nationalist policies of the kind that led up to pre-World War II fascism. World War II the lead up to World War II began with World War I, of course. And of that, Margaret Macmillan, a historian, has said, first, in the lead up to World War I, there was a failure of imagination in not seeing how destructive such a conflict would be. But second, there was a lack of courage to stand up who said there were no other choices than conflict left. Friends, there are always choices. On the 75th anniversary of the UN, choices loom large. Will we choose to cooperate to address the COVID-induced financial crisis while tackling climate change and the assault of our greedy consumption on biodiversity? Or will we too lack the imagination and the courage to see the full range of choices we have? The costs of walking away, of choosing to walk away from multilateralism have already been staggering. Rather than accepting that as inevitable or fiddling on the decks of the Titanic of the present system in debate of such as the Security Council membership, we must urgently build up a more broad, inclusive social movement through which to reimagine global solidarity and from which to galvanise the courage to insist upon new redistribution mechanisms that can deliver a death blow to social and economic discrimination and inequality, new narratives of common citizenry, not bounded by the fictions of nationalism or race, but by our common humanity, and new forms of leadership courageously committed to upholding new dynamics, humanising dynamics between the local and the global. May that vision, those choices, be what your discussions serve. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gilmore, for that address. We now move on to our next speaker in this pre-recorded address, which was filmed only on Friday. The Honourable Malcolm Turnbull is the 29th Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Australia, serving as Prime Minister from 2015 until 2018. He's been a lawyer, a journalist, a banker. He has been the head of the Australian Republican movement. He was in the Abbott government, the Minister for Communications. He has served as Leader of the Opposition, Minister for Environment, and various other roles. It is an honour to have him address this conference, and Mr. Turnbull, the floor is now yours.
Good morning. It's great to welcome you all to Monash University's United Nations Conference. This year, we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. The UN was set up following the devastation of the Second World War in 1945. It had one clear mission: to preserve the peace and build a better world. And that mission still stands today, but it has never been more important. We live in remarkable, extraordinary times, the tenor of which is economic and social change, unprecedented in all of history, in both its scale and pace. We only need to look at the events of this year, from the extraordinary bushfires in Australia, matched by similar bushfires on the west coast of the United States, a reminder of the reality of the impacts of global warming, not in years to come, but right now. And then the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, and the way this has shaped and changed the way we live, work, socialise, and will change it not just for the pandemic, but in the years to come. Now, with all of this disruption being more and more the new normal, we have to make volatility our friend. We have to recognise that is the nature of the times in which we live. There is no point trying to make the world less volatile, to make the pace of change slower. We have to ensure that we take advantage of it. This is the nature of the times in which we live. And success, of course, is never guaranteed. We need to create it, and we need to be resilient as we do so. We need to be prepared to try different things, new things. If they don't work out, do something else. We can never be daunted or put off by a lack of success. In these times, innovation is called for, resilience is called for, agility is called for, above all, imagination is called for. And that's why events such as this one, Monash University's United Nations Conference, are so important. Positive change is only possible when we harness the power of change together, when we meet, when we talk to one another, when we listen and respect each other's opinions. Respect, mutual respect, is the key to the success of our multicultural society in Australia. It is the key, all too often overlooked, to a peaceful world. And that key lies with you, Monash students today, our leaders of tomorrow. We need your talent, your dynamism, your contribution to drive our country forward, to engage in our region, to ensure that our planet stays healthy for the generations to come. It's a privilege to have the power and ability to shape what the next century looks like, to be at the forefront of change. The future demands a lot from us, and now is not the time to be cautious with our ambition. And so to all of you, Australia's future leaders, I encourage you to play your part. Thank you for being here today, for engaging in this important conference. I'm excited to hear about your discussions, your ideas, your solutions. May your enthusiasm, curiosity, and desire to have a lasting impact in the world drive you forward. Above all, be imaginative, be creative. Don't hesitate to come up with new ideas. I wish you all the very best for today and in your future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. Our last guest speaker is trained by profession as a paediatrician. She's a human rights activist who both parents were political prisoners. She started her career as a government advisor in the health ministry, rising to levels of running the ministry and then the defense ministry. She then became the first woman to be elected president of Chile in 2006, serving 2 terms from 2006 to 2010 and then 2014 to 2018. This is Her Excellency Michelle Bachelet, who now serves as the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, based in Geneva. Being a lifelong human rights activist and former Executive Director of UN Women, we are greatly honoured to hear some wise words from Ms. Bachelet. The floor is yours.
Thank you for inviting me to speak to the Monash International Affairs Society at this difficult, challenging time. The world is facing a global pandemic, climate catastrophe, and linked to both of them, massive global recession. With COVID-19, a fast-moving and global health crisis has collided with many slower and more entrenched political, social, and economic crises around the world. Those multiple underlying fractures, which have made us more vulnerable to this virus and create entry point for its harms, result from gaps in human rights protection. Discrimination and inequalities create intense suffering for affected communities and increase the vulnerability of all of society. Repression and crackdowns on people who criticize or speak up about policies deprive all of us of the benefits of people's experiences, contributions, and views. COVID-19, which zeroes in on these vulnerabilities and failures of protection, is shaking the foundation of our world, bringing turmoil and uncertainty to every country. And no matter how swiftly scientists manage to develop, distribute, and deliver vaccine, we can assume that we will need to manage COVID-19 for the foreseeable future. As young people poised to actively participate in building your society, and through this Model UN exercise, thinking about rebuilding the world, you face hard dilemmas. But COVID-19 is also teaching us a number of lessons. As you take these next 2 days to reflect on these issues, you may find it will be worth bearing some of these lessons in mind. To me, the first lesson of COVID-19, it is demonstration of the profound value of human rights-based approaches. Policies that deliver universal and equal access to social protection and healthcare. Institutions which promote respect for the views and rights of all members of society. And laws that require accountable policing and access to justice support greater social and economic resilience. They are the foundation of prosperity and political stability, and they protect vulnerable people from the worst impact of crisis, helping to avert the escalation of tensions and grievances into violence and conflict. In other words, in order to navigate this pandemic insecurity, we need more empowerment and more participation by civil society. We need to build up human rights-based systems to protect and cherish the people, who are the greatest resource of any country, and the only bottom line that really counts. We need to face policies that are grounded in right, democracy, and rule of law, so that we can minimize the devastating social and economic consequences of COVID-19 and build back societies that are resilient and fair. To effectively protect us from crisis, all of us need to not only national but also global policies that prioritize civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. We should be building global support for sustainable, inclusive, and climate-sensitive growth. It should be clear to all of us that a greater effort by everyone to fulfill the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development would have mitigated a great deal of the suffering we see today. And we need to strongly advance on that agenda in the coming decade. We're going to have to build back. We may as well build back better, and this will be among the challenges of your lifetimes. And as in every crisis, I think you will find that core values will ground you. Allow me to suggest what those principles may be. Whatever you brought to this university, you have certainly learned that no matter how deeply you examine one topic in international relations, that effort will always feel incomplete because each topic and each country is connected to so many others. We're not alone. Other people matter. Justice matters. Violence, exploitation, discrimination, and injustice have far-reaching consequences. By trying to see matters with full clarity and understand others' point of view, by acting with integrity to advance justice and human rights, by seeking always to build on your love for other people and all forms of life, by looking to construct and advance rather than to destroy, you will be shaping a life for yourself that holds steady to your principles. The world around us is very jittery and fearful now. The pace of technological change and environmental destruction is quickening. Human beings are breaking our planet. Catastrophic climate change, declining biodiversity, mass extinctions, plastic polluted oceans are urgent threats, and the motivation of world leaders to constructively and jointly address these issues is flagging. So we need you. In a very real sense, it is up to you. We can rebuild in ways that uphold human rights, the right to life, liberty and security of person, the right to education, health, food, shelter, clothing, and social security, freedom from any form of discrimination, whether based on sex, race, belief, sexual orientation, or any other factor, freedom of expression and the right to privacy, freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, freedom from torture and from unlawful or arbitrary arrest or detention, the right to a fair trial. It is these principles that build more stable, more peaceful, and more adaptable societies with dialogue, cooperation, and respect. Thank you for standing up for human rights.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bachelet, for those wise words. We now move on to our final speakers, and that is our Co-Secretaries General for MUNash 2020, Dean Antos and Charlotte Jones. Both our Secretaries General have done an amazing job in making this a flexible conference. Their passion, drive, perseverance, and any other synonym you can find in a thesaurus is to the utmost and to the highest of standards. It has been an honour to see them put all this work into MUNash 2020. Unfortunately, while we can't meet in person, they never shied away from the task, and they ensured that MUNash would still run. I hold a gavel in my hand, and anybody who knows me knows that I overuse my gavel in committee sessions and last year when I was Secretary General. So to ensure the tradition continued, I sent a gavel to both Dean and Charlotte to open this conference. And we actually probably spent a good time actually discussing how to use the gavel. However, it is really important to hear the wise words of our Secretaries General, and I now hand over to them to open our conference.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to MUNash 2020. I, along with Dean Antos, are your Secretaries General of this year's conference. Over the past couple of months, the Secretariat has been working hard to make this conference possible, especially in these trying times where we've had to pivot from organising a physical conference to the first ever online MUNash conference.
This has included long Zoom meetings, multiple group chats in every combination you could think of, in order for us Melburnians in lockdown to communicate effectively. But nevertheless, we are excited to finally share with you the most unorthodox MUNash in recent history. Now in its 8th year, MUNash is the hard work of our diligent Secretariat and the Monash International Affairs Society.
In the tradition of Model UN, this incorporates insightful debate, heightened tensions, and at the end of the day, consensus building coupled with fun socials, where each delegate can get to know the person behind the state. Although a simulation, this gives you a small taste of what it is like for diplomats in major summits, competing against the views of other states. It is for these reasons Dean and I have strived over the past few months to present to you this online conference.
The next 2 days will consist of fervent debate and endless negotiation upon key contemporary issues of international importance. This year more than ever, our Secretariat has attempted to deliver MUN committees which are unique and less traditional than ever before. Most notably, the inclusion of the Australian and New Zealand National Cabinet to discuss issues of a travel bubble during COVID. We hope that this means that each and every one of you will get an opportunity to build on your knowledge, develop your skills of public speaking and negotiation, and create friendships.
For me, Model UN is a powerful tool for students to explore the various policy options facing diplomats and world leaders to respond to issues affecting the global community. The immersive aspect of Model UN really adds to the feeling of being a step away from the kind of discussions that may surround certain issues and topics on the world stage today. I see MUN as an important stepping stone for globally minded students who wish to pursue international relations endeavours in the future. The skills and knowledge, such as public speaking, negotiation, and resolution writing learnt through Model UN, are invaluable skills for future careers, particularly in the international relations sphere. Model UN has also been a great avenue to meet new friends and have global opportunities to travel and participate in conferences overseas.
Munning for me is a unique experience where people from different countries and cultures come together to attempt to discuss topics of immense importance throughout our region and the broader international arena. This conference is no different, as we have members from not only interstate, but from our international community, including some friends from across the ditch in New Zealand. Model UN is therefore a fantastic platform for developing lifelong friends and establishing lifelong memories. Although this is a digital MUN, our socials officers have worked extremely hard to present countless opportunities to socialise throughout the next 2 days. We look forward to participating in their events. This year we have had an incredible showing of new MUNners, eager to try out their hand in the world of Model United Nations. To those beginners, we wish you all the best in not only this conference, but your future endeavours in the world of MUN. We hope this conference will catapult the passion from within for a love of debating, negotiation, and public speaking.
To those advanced MUNners, we hope that this conference provides another opportunity for you to engage with your international relations passions and improve your negotiation and public speaking skills. We look forward to seeing the engaging debate and collaboration between both new and old MUNners. Good luck, and we hope that you enjoy the conference.
Now, in light of what Ryan had mentioned earlier, and in light of MUN tradition, we now declare MUNash 2020 open. Over to you, Charlotte.
Thanks, Dean.
Thank you both so much, and congratulations on all the work that you have done over the last few months. Good luck to all the delegates here today, and we now ask you to go to your committee sessions. To find the links for your committee sessions, there was a master sheet of all the Zoom links, which can be found in your groups on Facebook. Before heading off, we'd like to thank you all for this opening ceremony. We'd like to thank all the speakers. We'd like to thank all our guests, even under these virtual circumstances. We thank those guests who are not delegates from the university as well for attending. We also thank you for all the support during these trying times. Please now head to your committees. We look forward to your debate, and good luck for the conference.